So today I would like to welcome three speakers, Kathleen William, Erin Peavy, and Sandra Harris. And they are here to talk about loneliness and how architecture and design would help in creating social connections. I will read portions of the abstract before I go ahead and introduce our presenters. Loneliness and social isolation have soared around the world, having a profound impact on our physical, mental, and social health. Decades of research show it is linked closely to physical and mental health outcomes, including dementia, heart disease, depression, and stroke, that it is especially important for older adults, and that supportive, age-friendly environments can be part of the solution. The AARP Livable Communities initiative is helping to create a roadmap for cities to create more equitable and aging-friendly spaces. Many of the principles involve easy walkability, safety, ample places to sit with shelter from the element, and consistent sidewalks with curb cuts foster social connections. Our speakers here today come from different backgrounds, and as you will see through the introductions, I will start by introducing Kathleen William. Kathleen is a Harvard-trained social scientist, award-winning innovator, and leading expert in social health. Drawing from over a decade of studying, sharing, and applying the science of human connection, Kathleen champions social health as an author, strategic advisor, keynote speaker, and founder of Social Health Labs, a national nonprofit that empowers community builders. Weaving together cutting-edge science and mindset shifts, her new book, The Art and Science of Connection, Why Social Health is the Missing Key to Living Longer, Healthier, published in 2024, will be available next month in June 2024. We're excited about that, Kathleen. We also have our second speaker, Erin, who just joined us. Hi, Erin. Erin Peavy is an award-winning architect, researcher, and thought leader. As vice president and social design leader of HKS, she helps integrate research and practice to advance design for well-being, combat loneliness, and foster community health across the globe. Her work is featured in Psychology Today, TEDx, Metropolis, Curb, Healthline, Business Insider, and her own podcast, Shared Space. Our third speaker, the last but definitely not the least, and my friend Sandra Harris. I'm thrilled to see you here today. So Sandra, her story with the Design for Aging goes before me, and she has contributed over the past 20 plus years a lot to this committee. And we're very happy to have you back here with us as a speaker. Sandra is the state president of AARP Massachusetts and co-leader of the Massachusetts Task Force to End Loneliness and Build Community. She is a 2021-2022 Gen to Gen Innovation Fellow, a member of Commit to Connect nationwide network of champions, and the Age-Friendly Boston Advisory Council. She's a retired principal of S. Harris Interiors, an interior design firm that specializes in senior living design. Before I turn it to you, Kathleen, I would like to ask if some of our attendees, if they are able to turn their camera. It's always nicer for a speaker to talk to faces rather than names. I understand people might be on the road. We don't want to put people in danger, but if you're at the desk, any other place where you can turn your camera, it's always nicer to talk to faces. With this, I will turn it to Kathleen. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the warm welcome and the invitation to speak with you all today. We've been looking forward to this. All right, so we are going to dive into this topic of social health by design, an evidence-based approach to creating socially connected communities. And over our time together, we're going to touch on a few pieces. So first, I'll kind of set the stage with some of the research and insights around why social health is such an important part of aging and the research behind that. And then I'll pass it over to Erin, who will talk about designing physical spaces for social health and some of the specific evidence-based ways that we can actually do that. And then lastly, we'll turn it over to Sandra, who will talk about some of the statewide initiatives within Massachusetts and how you as architects and designers might be able to get involved in some of those. So with that in mind, I will skip over the introduction since you did such a lovely job of sharing some of our backgrounds to begin with. And we will instead dive straight into the importance of social health in aging and why it is really so important that we're here talking about this topic in the first place. So last year, many of you may have seen that the US Surgeon General issued an advisory on the epidemic of isolation and loneliness in this country. This is something that has been on the coattails of many initiatives around the world, including the UK and Japan appointing ministers of loneliness, including the World Health Organization launching a commission on social connection. And as you can see, I pulled out just two of the many, many graphs that are included in his advisory to show you here. One, that middle graph is an example of how social isolation has increased by an average of 24 hours per month for people in the US. That's over the past around 20 years. And similarly, the amount of time that we spend engaging with friends has decreased by an average of 20 hours per month. So you can see that we, in general, here in the US, tend to be spending more time alone and less time with our friends. So this is quite an issue. And as Philippe said, my background is in public health, and I really spent time examining how can we address this through the lens of public health. And that's what we're going to be diving into today. However, you don't need to be lonely to benefit from connection, right? Social health is something that all of us need. And furthermore, not everyone who is isolated feels lonely, and similarly, not everyone who is surrounded by people feels connected. We all really need to have supportive relationships to live a fulfilling, meaningful life, and as we'll see in just a moment, to live a healthy life as well. So as alarming as these statistics are on isolation and loneliness and the public health effects, it's also important to recognize that all of us are part of this conversation, and we benefit from investing in social ties for absolutely everyone. On the research end, we can see over decades of studies that disconnection truly is harmful, whereas connection has the power to heal. So just to pull out a few examples of the rich data on this topic, people who are isolated or lonely on a chronic basis tend to have a higher risk of early death, as much as 29% increased risk, a higher risk of dementia, which is about a 50% increased risk for older adults specifically. And we see that isolation and loneliness are linked to a whole host of other health outcomes as well, things like depression, anxiety, heart disease, stroke, suppressed immune responses, high blood pressure, dementia, and like I said, mortality. So we can see that this is very detrimental, but on the flip side, having supportive relationships, enjoying a sense of belonging to a community is truly transformative. In fact, if you have strong ties, you're over 2.5 times more likely to report having good or excellent health, as just one example. So what we can see from some of these data points is that relationships matter for more than just happiness, right? It's absolutely feeling connected brings joy and meaning and purpose to our lives, but it's also, it goes beyond that kind of mental health and happiness benefit and has true significance for our physical health and our longevity. So the benefits of designing for connection truly are far-reaching across the lifespan. There was some really fascinating research that came out during COVID-19 that I think is important to highlight, which is that quite a few studies here in the US, but also in countries around the world, found that communities that were more connected through a variety of different measurements actually had significantly fewer cases and deaths due to COVID-19. This is a screenshot of an article that I wrote during that time that kind of dove into some of this research. But what this means is that relationships truly are a source of resilience, right? If the places, the physical places and the communities in them that are meaningfully connected end up having better health outcomes during a global pandemic, that's something we really need to pay attention to. It also signals that the most effective way to perhaps improve people's health and well-being really is upstream, taking preventive action so that those relationships are in place before a disaster like the pandemic actually strikes. And in the long run, we can better serve our communities by focusing on that prevention piece, having that resilience in place literally before we need it. So as you can see from these kinds of insights, there's really power in kind of shifting our outlook and thinking about this topic of loneliness and connection through a more positive lens, focusing on the assets that we can develop for everyone, those who are lonely, but also for all of us who need connection as a vital source of our health and well-being. And also from a very proactive approach, right? Literally building into the communities that we live in and work in and play in the attributes that will help us all foster connection. So with that in mind, I invite us all to kind of reframe the conversation, moving into that positive asset proactive lens and really centering around this idea of social health. And I think it's worth defining this because this isn't, it gets underappreciated, right? It's not as prevalent in the mainstream discourse as physical and mental health are. So when we talk about social health today, what we mean is the dimension of our overall health and well-being that comes from connection. So if you think about our physical health as at its most basic level about our bodies, and mental health as about our minds, social health is really about our relationships. And another kind of helpful way to think about this is that if you imagine our overall health and well-being as this Greek temple with columns that support it, you can see that there are physical, mental, and social columns. Perhaps toward the back and sides, there are columns for spiritual health or environmental health. But the point here is that all these aspects of our health and well-being are interconnected, right? So if we strengthen our social health, that's going to benefit our physical and our mental health as well. And similarly, if one of these is suffering, right? If our physical, mental, or social well-being is is jeopardized in any way, that's going to weaken the overall temple structure and our overall health and well-being. So really seeing these as in conjunction is very important. So when we use this language of social health, what we don't mean is social determinants of health, which some of you may be familiar with, which is this idea of kind of broader factors in our environments, in our society that influence our health and well-being, such as housing, income, literacy, access to food and healthcare, things like that. Connection could be considered one of those social determinants of health, but this social health pillar is so impactful for our overall health and well-being that it's really valuable to elevate it in our overall conversation and way of thinking about this. Similarly, social health is a little distinct from social capital, which is more about the resources that we have access to through our social networks. So coming from a public health background, I really think there's value in thinking about a given individual's health and well-being in the broader context around them. And so you can see here a graphic that shows what's called the social ecological model, where we can see that an individual is embedded in the interpersonal networks around them, in the organizations and institutions that are around them, the environment, and of course, the policy in the place where they live. And so each of these kind of levels and kind of context around each of our individual health is an opportunity for intervention, right? At the individual level, that might mean helping people develop the knowledge and skills and beliefs they need to connect and to be less lonely. At the interpersonal level, that might mean intervening with family, friends, and social networks. At the organizational level, that could mean intervening in our communities, in our schools, in our workplaces. At the environmental level, this is thinking about how we can intervene in our cultural norms and the resources and the places where we live. And then finally, at that policy level, thinking about the federal and state and local laws that have these downstream effects on our health and well-being. So if we think about a given person's social health in that broader context, what comes to the forefront is that there is a huge opportunity to intervene in the built environment, to literally shape the buildings and cities and communities that we all live, work, and play in ways that optimize our chances of living socially healthy, engaged lives. So that's what we're going to be exploring further. On the left here, you can see a screenshot of a textbook. In that, I have a textbook chapter called Social Capital and Community Design that looks at a lot of the research and really nerds out on some of the data on this and what the research literature tells us about design features that support creating built environments that are socially healthy. And then on the right, you can see a report that our own Erin Peavy wrote, Connecting IRL, looking even further from the perspective of an architect at how we can truly apply those research insights and design spaces for social well-being. So we are going to dive into her insights now. And I did just want to spotlight that if this topic is of interest to you, I'd be happy to send you a PDF of that textbook chapter. Feel free to email me. And then also my book, while broader in scope, it does focus on the power of communities and the spaces that we live in and ways that architects, including Erin, and community builders, including Sandra, and many others, are actually transforming their physical spaces in order to promote social health. Okay, so with that, we are going to pass it over to Erin to guide us through designing physical spaces for social health.
All right. Okay, first step, technology. Okay, let's try share screen. Can you guys see my screen? Okay, cool. First, I just want to say thank you. Thank you guys so much for having us. Such an honor to be here, and I really appreciate it. So I have been asking myself this question, can design heal loneliness, for a while? Can design heal loneliness? And what I've realized is it's really about connection, right? It's not just about loneliness. It's like Hasley said, it's about connection. And the person that taught me everything I know about connection is this woman. She used to have this saying that she would, whenever we would prepare for a party or go to an event or whatever, she was always like, it's about connection, not perfection. It's about connection, not perfection. And this is my mother, Catherine Owen. She was a teacher and counselor, and among many other things that she was, what she wanted most in many ways was to be a grandmother. And so when I first became pregnant, I was really excited, but that she would get to fulfill that, you know, but I think we kind of all understood that that her time was limited. She was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when I was in early school in my undergraduate. And so ultimately, when I had my daughter, who looked a lot like this little bean here, it was a time that, you know, when Kesley talks about times of transition, times of struggle, those can be so lonely. And I think anybody that's become a new parent, especially under circumstances like that, understands how that can make you feel so lonely in this world, even when you do have people around you. And one of the things that I would always do is I would lace up my shoes, I would wrap her around my chest, and we would go out on these walks around my neighborhood. And a long time ago, I used to live in New York, and I love my husband and I really lucked out by having one of the few walkable neighborhoods in Dallas, Texas. And I would, you know, walk her around, and we would, you know, wave and talk with the other moms and the kind grocers. And I think for me, it wasn't just about having those conversations, yeah, that's great, but it's also about just like being in person and seeing how your community holds you, how there's space for you. And the power of the built environment to help to create that. And so that, you know, is really what I'm all about. I'm all about the human side of things. That was what brought me to architecture. I'm a licensed architect with a background in psychology. People is why I do this. And this experience that I had mirrors a lot of different experiences that we have around the importance of social connection and also how our places help to create that or block us from that. And there's a picture of me working with a community to do just that, to create a shared space for them to gather. And so what I'm going to be talking about is as a researcher, what I found in the importance of the design of the built environment to support social connection. So research tells us that the design qualities of a place, so things like walkability, sense of place, greenness, street design, and architecture, all have these abilities to foster social interaction, social support, civic pride, even to be able to help get out the vote. And when you ask about like, okay, but why? What is behind that? It's really about when we are a collective, when we know each other, when we have stronger bonds, then we are able to have more social health and also more social capital, and be able to have integration of more diverse people and resilience through change. If anyone has anyone on here, I'm going to do the thing where I can like see everybody's hands. Has anybody in here read Palaces for the People by Eric Kleinberg? I'm always butcher his name. Anyways, it is a fabulous read. Palaces for the People is really about, it's the name that was given to libraries as palaces for the people. And so it's about connecting people, about bringing them in and providing these services. And it really, some of his beautiful work echoes and is really groundbreaking in how does social connection and the built environment help us be more resilient in times of struggle, which we understand that with the existing status of climate change, etc., there's a major struggle going on, and that the built environment can help be a part of changing that. And one of the places that is so impactful, that I think is so important for older adults, intergenerational spaces especially, and all throughout, is third spaces or third places. So how many of you guys are familiar with third places? I'm gonna like do that. Okay, cool. Ray Oldenburg, sociologist in the 1980s, came up with this term of third places. It understands that first places are like your home, where it is private, but also relaxed. You can be yourself. You know, I always joke that you can like sit in your sweats and eat ice cream out of a pint, versus your second place is kind of in some ways like we're more formal. We have our facade or our persona, and we're showing up as the people that we need to be. But our third places are these magical places where we're able to show up as our true selves, but also be around other people. And what research has shown is that these places are fundamentally unique, and their ability to allow people to break down traditional barriers and create bonds, and that they enable healing, boost diversity, well-being, and provide support. And one of my favorite things about third spaces is how they are enabling places. And so what that means is, like, as we go through times of struggle, you know, I shared one of my times of struggles, it's really about enabling healthy behaviors, enabling strength and resilience. Thinking about going through a divorce, coming out of something hard, where can you go to get out of your norm and be bonded with other people? And, you know, again, not saying that third places are going to solve loneliness, but I've seen a rise of articles recently really talking about helping to help people find their places. But since I'm talking to a group of architects, I really want to talk about, like, what does it mean to create fabulous third places, and what can we learn from the research. And so one of my favorite best third places is this right here, Bryant Park, who, by show of hands, who's familiar with Bryant Park? Woo! My peeps. Okay, all right. If you're not, that's okay. You will be very soon. So one of the best third places I've ever experienced was Bryant Park. And this, like, my office was right up here when I lived in New York. And I would always marvel at its vibrancy and the way that it would liven up the whole area, drawing people together. But what's interesting is that the story of Bryant Park wasn't always so rosy. The first time it was redesigned in the 1930s, they were using the quote unquote best thinking at the time, these classical ideas. I think some of us were trained in some of those ideas around keeping the misfits out from doing harm, using bushes as barriers. And what they found is that instead of, you know, being this fabulous space that they wanted it to be, the park quickly became a place of ill repute and a magnet for crime. And so it wasn't until 30 years later that William White was called on to help to understand this problem. Again, he was an urban sociologist. He made careful observations to understand the actual use rather than design. I love this because I think it captures so much of at least my experience in design school. And White really observed this component of access. So he talked about both psychological and physical access. And I think, he was talking about that more than 30 years ago and was really ahead of his time. And he understood that it was critical to be more welcoming, inclusive, and, you know, since I'm talking architects, permeable, to be able to bring people in. And so partnering with landscape architects, planners, and policymakers, they transformed the park, bringing in new and thriving buildings into what it is now. Because we look at all of these businesses here, this is one of the, you know, most sought after places in New York City. And it wouldn't be that way if not for the changes in design to really mirror our social needs. And so this is a wonderful example, but really what I want to know is, okay, but why? Like, what does the research say about how to design for connection? And that led me here. And when you see this, think about like how you feel. For many of us, if we see this in a movie, we just instantly want to go there. But what, like, again, what is it about that? And the research shows us that it is about these things. It's about accessibility for different ages and abilities, not just accessibility meaning like, oh, you can, you know, get a wheelchair in there easily, but meaning really like welcoming and inclusive. And it has lots of different natural elements, the blue sky, the warmth of the clay bricks. There's activation happening through the cafes and the movement. And really allowing people to just enjoy watching other people, our favorite pastime. People are allowed to choose where they want to be, whether they want to be at the center of the action or on the periphery. There's this component of human scale, which I think a lot of you guys are probably really familiar with. But, you know, we can see that in everything from the bricks the size of human hands to the umbrellas, you know, sort of mirroring some of the feeling that we have when we're under a tree canopy. And lastly, thinking about the sense of place being marked by, you know, the fountain at the center, telling us the story of the people that made it originally, the original craftspeople. And when we look at these together, we can say that third places like this have a certain panache: place, accessibility, nature, activation, choice, and human scale. All of these working together. But like any good designer or architect, like, let's not take my word for it. I would love to test this together. And so this is going to be interactive. I'm going to turn on the part where I can like see you guys. All right. So we're looking here. I want you to take a few seconds, really take this in, and think about what is working to foster connection. What isn't? And because we're all designers here, what would you change? Does anyone want to share? This is your invitation to be opinionated. Philippe, I saw you take yourself off mute.
I mean, there's a lot to change. The windows first,
It's true.
creating more visibility.
Go on. Yeah. Creating more visibility.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Somebody
Anyone else?
Somebody else?
I would say some kind of awning or something to indicate the entry so that it has more human scale for the entry versus this big flat architectural front.
Amen. All right, one more.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
My sense of place is totally negated. And I know that's not all a critique, right? There are probably some positive things, but it's New York City. There should be some character there.
Totally. 100%. So I do not just pick on this place because it was the Whole Foods that I used to have to shop at, and it is awful. But also because it's actually been studied. So if anybody knows the work of Colin Ellard and Charles Montgomery, they basically hooked people up, looked at their stress responses, and a lot of what you guys are talking about, this monotony, what they found was that people in this space and in others had higher stress responses. In similar areas, they would be less likely to help a stranger that seems lost.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's important. That's important in cultivating trust and like all of these things that we're talking about. And so this is like sort of some of my, assessments. And what I love is that Whole Foods got the memo. Like this has a lot of those aspects, right? And you can say, well, yeah, this again is near where I live now. You can say, well, it's different because I'm sure it costs much more, this and that. There was different setbacks. But I think that one feels like a place to be that is welcome and of that neighborhood, and the other not so much. So we're going to look at a different scale. This is from a senior living facility that we've done here at HKS. This Legacy Midtown Park. I've actually had the opportunity to spend some time here, and it was really lovely. But again, I'm a believer in critique. And I'd love us to look at this and think about, okay, what is working well? And I know you guys, like, you're not being able to see everything. There's, just to give you a taste, there's like a bocce ball court on the other side. There's a fountain back here, some seating, and this is sort of in the center of things. Who wants to talk about either what's working well or what they would change on any of the dynamics of the panache scale? Philippe's like hands are like cracking me up.
I don't want to be the first one. Go somebody else.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'll just say it feels very sterile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Anything you would do to change that? Go ahead. I won't make you solve that. Alan, I'm sorry. You can also be like, girl, I'm not responding to you.
No, just warm it up generally.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So like increase the temperature thermally. Just kidding.
And color and tones.
You guys are
make it not feel so big too. It feels very grand, and that can be very overwhelming as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Ruth, I saw you take yourself off mute.
Knowing all the details, it looks like it could be acoustically too
loud.
Lots of hard surfaces and glossy surfaces. So
Awesome. Anyone else?
I don't know if I would have people sitting with their back to like that major circulation thing without any kind of like, you feel a little bit exposed in that position.
Totally. Awesome. Cool.
There's also no place for people to sit by themselves, but to be around others.
Yeah, right? Like if instead there was like a little kind of like booth seating where you could look out and enjoy. That's not booth. It's like you know what I'm talking about?
It's like a counter bar kind of
thank you.
Observation space, but also be within 6 feet of each other so that there's a chance to have a good morning. How are you doing? Nice to see you.
Yeah.
It's very intimidating to sit down in a space by yourself.
Yeah. I love that.
Erin, I
Great.
think this glass between the outside and the inside, as much as it wants to visually connect, this strip of plant in between feels like it's pushing people apart Although it's there to create transparency and green, it prevents people who are outside to get closer to those who are sitting inside.
Mhm.
And
Also
we're
very
just looking at the
monochromatic.
photo. We don't know the whole job.
Totally. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, this is what we're here for. This is what we were built for, people. No, just kidding. But so I talked a little bit about some of my observations, different components. But I also just want to say that was probably obvious to you all that like it doesn't need to be a full building. It doesn't need to be expensive. This does all of those aspects, right? It has sense. So I say the sense of place is like it's mostly of the main body, but it has accessibility. It has different choice of where you want to sit. It has nature. It has human scale, all of these different components, all within such a tiny space. And you could think about if one of them is missing, how like it harms the continuity of everything. So with that, I will transition to Sandra, and Sandra, do you want me to tee up something that you're going to be talking about? You want me to wait? You're on mute.
No, go for
Don't
it.
tee it up. Oh, okay. Okay. So I think, this is a great example, but like one of the things that Sandra's going to be talking about, she's going to share some different examples locally, tell you what they're up to, but kind of I'm just going to put the little seed in your brain to see how it sprouts of maybe a potential design competition to look at spaces of connection and be able to use some of this in that. So with that, Sandra, I will stop sharing my slides as soon as I figure out how. Go. Oh, also, I'm sorry, I have got to tell you guys, we are publishing in 2 weeks. We are publishing through the Foundation for Social Connection a report on the built environment, which I am thrilled about because the built environment has for far too long not been recognized. So I will share with you guys a QR code for that as well. Okay, Sandra.
Thank you. Thank you, Erin. Okay, can everyone see that?
We're seeing your notes, not the other way around. Could you switch which?
I'm just gonna do the two, how do I'm not seeing it.
Do you have 2 screens or 1?
I have 1 screen. I don't need to share my notes. I need to just share the, something's in the way.
You can click the,
On the bottom, there is the something that looks like a monitor right next to the plus and minus. To the right.
mhm.
Further to the right.
To the right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just went
You just
over
passed-
it. No, keep,
You just passed
yeah,
it.
right there. Click on that. Or
Okay.
like move around a little bit so it lets you click on it. There you go. Click. Mm.
How about that? Okay, folks, it worked earlier.
Yeah, that thing at the bottom is the thing that
It is, yeah.
takes you to the
But it's,
slideshow view.
I can't see, I can't get to it. It's,
You were almost, oh, you're there. You're
Yeah.
there. Click.
Yeah.
Click. Oh, click.
click.
Yes, you got it. Nailed it.
Okay, thanks everyone. Sorry for that. I would like to share with you an initiative that has started in Massachusetts, and it's the Massachusetts Coalition to Build Community and End Loneliness. Our work started in 2019, fall of 2019, when we began to notice the impact of the loneliness and social isolation in our communities, especially among older adults. We are a statewide network of local and state governments, not-for-profits, age-friendly directors, community leaders, colleges and universities, thought leaders and other volunteers who are just interested in addressing this epidemic. Our mission is to ensure that all residents of the Commonwealth feel connected to their community and enjoy a sense of social health. We have decided that we will come together, move out of our silos, and combine our resources and ingenuity for a greater impact throughout the Commonwealth. We are now 68 statewide partner organizations with 110 members and thought leaders and growing daily. We convene monthly for the last 4 years. We were highlighted at a national conference at Harvard last year, and we are considered a replicable state model. A lot of states are calling us and trying to create this same framework that we have done in the Commonwealth. One of the things that we've done is created a Reach Out MA campaign where we have promoted the health benefits of connections and the benefits of staying connected, as well as the risk of loneliness. You may have seen some of the PSAs that have done the videos that we created and some of the ads where we were able to bring in town officials, local officials to do PSAs, encouraging everyone to stay connected, to reach out in small ways, and especially during COVID. We have on National Good Neighbor Day, which is September 28th of each year, we hold statewide virtual summits. For the last 4 years, we've hosted these annual convenings to share the learnings that we've had, to share research, to share projects. And they've been led by noted leaders. 2020, we had Lisa Ryerson. 2021, Risa Wilkinson, Mark Freeman from Cogenerate. And last year, we were featuring some of the work from the Surgeon General. We've launched a television series called Connect, which airs on community media channels across Massachusetts. This was specifically designed for those who are not on social media, our traditional community access television watchers, people, especially older adults in rural communities. There we explore themes related to loneliness, social connections, and healthy aging, and this is done monthly. We have gone into the communities. Our guiding principles are quite simple. We are grassrooted. We work in communities. We go into communities and work with them in creating socially connected spaces. What you're seeing here is you may see popping up in your neighborhood, happy to chat benches, where there's just simply benches that are put in welcoming, safe places where people are encouraged to come and sit. And generally the feeling is there's a sign on the bench that says, if you like to chat, sit here and someone will join you. We have started a program called Conversations MA, which are pop-ups all over where we encourage people to just pull up tables and chairs and just talk to each other. You know, we've all gotten to the point where we don't talk to each other. And this is the way that we feel that communities, business leaders can just set up tables and chairs and encourage people to come out and talk. Conversations MA is not agenda written. Just no agenda, just coming in and talk. Generally, there are conversation cards that people can use and select a question or a topic that they would like to discuss. We've started a program that's called Activated Boston that has been funded by the John Hancock Foundation, where we were able last year to activate 2 neighborhoods in Boston where funds were given to them to create socially connected spaces. We were quite fortunate and lucky that John Hancock has agreed to continue, and we have just selected, I think it's 3 more neighborhoods in Boston. We're concentrating in Boston now, but these are funds that are being provided by John Hancock. We're encouraging, soliciting other fundings for other projects, not only in Boston, but in other areas. We're pushing out a program soon that's called Generations Over Dinner, which is just an opportunity for people to have dinner parties and try to get as many generations around the table as possible. We're also promoting AARP provides, I think it's twice a year, community challenge grants where communities have an opportunity to apply for funding to create small projects, things like gardening areas, trails, fit lots, and those kinds of things. So we continue to promote that. We're doing that twice a year, and people who are interested can stay in touch with Livable Communities at AARP. And this year we are moving from public awareness to action and proposing, instead of having our annual summit, which has been a virtual event, we are pushing out Good Neighbor Day of Action and hoping to have the governor proclaim September 28th, which is National Good Neighbor Day, to be Massachusetts Day of Action. We've been seen and heard. We were featured in New York Times and the Health Affairs, Comcast's Newsmaker, the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald, Radio Boston, and most recently in Boston.com. We have received and have embraced the Surgeon General Advisory, in which he recommends the 6 pillars for advancing social connections and community. We were pleasantly pleased to see that a lot of the things that we are already doing are already included in the recommendations. So we will organize our success as we move forward and use the remainder of the advisory as our map for moving forward. One of the things that we're really getting ready to do is to launch the Massachusetts Good Neighbor Day of Action campaign. We want to increase our public awareness, begin to do a better job of promoting social health. And we really need to find the hard to find. We're making a lot of progress statewide, but we still know that there are some people who we have not been able to locate. There are many other people living in lonely spaces, and we need to spend more time looking at how to find them. And lastly, we want to promote a statewide culture of connectivity. One of the Surgeon General pillars, actually the first one, deals with strengthening the social infrastructure in local communities. And this is how I think you can help us. We want to promote the design of the built environment that supports connections. When we look at those systemic structures that cause loneliness and social isolation, we know that 3 of the major ones are the lack of socially connected outdoor and public spaces, housing, and transportation. And guess what, guys? We're all designers, right? We all know that we can solve this problem set. So we really need you in this space. We want to scale our community connection programs by extending some of the activities and programs that I've already described. We want to make sure that we do all this work with equity lens, and make sure that we're not leaving any communities behind. And we want to expand this work to all sectors of our communities. We've got to get the business sector involved. We've got to get the architects, designers, and planners involved. You know, this is work that we all have to do and create a statewide approach to addressing this problem. Here's some examples of some things that we're kind of really interested in doing, especially when we're looking at the built outdoors and public spaces, the built environment. And these are the kinds of things that we think that you can help us with. The other thing that we're excited about is the potentials of doing research in this area and helping to inform the national agenda on what is working. It's a matter of not only doing the work that we're doing, but making sure that there are best practices and things that can be as easily replicated and recommended to other communities. We want to expand all of the findings that we're finding throughout the country. And we also want to make sure that we stay in touch with the community. We want to know that what we're doing and all of our efforts are making a difference for our residents in Massachusetts. We want to advance intergenerational approach. We want to promote and uplift the work of those organizations who are working with us, organizations like Friendship Works and Little Brothers Friends of the Elderly. We want to expand our programs to colleges and universities and even to schools. And we want to promote our whole society, our sectors, bring in all of our sectors again. So moving forward to Good Neighbor Day of Action in Massachusetts and getting ready for that, Erin, Kathleen, and I have been brainstorming us some ways that you might be interested in working with us. So Erin, go for it.
All right. So I think, you know, what Sandra's kind of teed up is the potential, you know, for this to be taken in a new direction. I already kind of like talked about it, but yeah. I feel, yes, please go ahead.
One opportunity, and we'd
Yeah.
like your feedback, especially yours, Philippe, because you and I have had some conversations about this for some time.
Yeah.
But one thought is, especially trying to create an intergenerational approach to this work and bringing in young people, is to perhaps identify some spaces we feel around the community. It does not have to be in the Boston area or limited to the Boston area, that would benefit for some innovative ideas for improving the space, creating third spaces perhaps to communities, and just running a design competition, inviting the local architects, design schools to be involved in this project.
Do you have a place in mind? I think this is a great idea for our committee to think about. But do you have a specific place in mind? Yeah.
I don't personally have any place in mind, but I think if we took the time to look, I think there might be some places that we can find. Ruth, I know you may have a few in mind, right?
Not yet, but I'm thinking.
Does anyone else have any ideas or thoughts, or what's your thought on this? And we know that September 28 is coming quickly.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be done by September 28, but just as part of this initiative to get to have Massachusetts continue to lead in helping to address this nation of loneliness.
And you go ahead. Yes, please.
So I'm the non-architect in the group. Hi, I'm Ann Doyle. Great remarks. I met Philippe because I was most recently the president of LaSalle Village on the campus of LaSalle University in Newton, Massachusetts for the past 8 years. And I left because I was so, I saw the benefits so deeply of the connections between older adults and younger traditional students, as well as all the staff in between. And I think I really like to think about multi-generational, that whole span. And so as I now, through my company, Spark Living and Learning, I'm getting calls from all sorts of institutions that are interested in doing just what you all have been talking about, and especially Sandra, thinking about other types of institutions, cultural institutions, museums, laboratories, that are really interested in bringing other perspectives in and recognize the benefits of expanding that conversation. So I'd love to talk with you further, Sandra. Maybe we could put our heads together. But I'm also getting a lot of calls from high schools, elementary schools, public, private, after-school programs, everything you can think of. Everyone's interested in connecting. It doesn't. It's not just about older adults, as you've been pointing out, and how we design spaces not just for quote unquote safety, but for actually enjoying ourselves, no matter what our age is.
Thank you for your comments, Anne, because, you know, we're finding that, I mean, today I have about 4 emails from young people at colleges and universities wanting to be a part of this work. And I think when we began this work, it was because of older adults. In Massachusetts, we knew that there were over 540,000 older adults living alone. Not that they were lonely, but certainly at risk of loneliness. But we're finding, and research is showing, that the most lonely are those between the ages of 18 and Cassie is a 25. Those are the most lonely. So we have been spending a lot of time. I'm doing a program. We're doing programs at Boston College, doing some work with Emerson. So young people are really interested in this work.
The other piece I'll say is what I'm finding working with some universities is their focus is on giving back. And so connecting people across all ages in things that they love. So if it's climate focus, it might be that older, younger, in between are all interested in. And that actually, when people are engaged in things of mutual interest, it just naturally creates organic friendships.
I wanted to
100%.
jump in and sorry, I think I have a bad connection. I wanted to jump in. I'm Jonathan Lashley, the co-presenter with Philippe, and I wanted to thank our 3 presenters for a wonderful presentation so far. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, keep
We
going.
can hear you great.
All right, excellent. To tie into that, I think for those of us on the discussion who are architects and designers, so often we're given a discrete task, right? Whether it's creating a 3rd space for seniors or residences for seniors or a medical facility or a senior center. I think the challenge, and I might ask Erin, I don't have the solution, but the challenge is how do you create or find an opportunity to integrate a multi-generational approach? And I don't know, Erin or any of our other else on the call, how we do that when we're tasked with something that's so limited to begin with, right?
Totally. I mean, so I can just share, I mean, and crowdsource, we have like a lot of people on the call, but one of the ways that I've worked towards that is by just starting at the beginning to say, like, I can do this and I'm happy to do this. I also want you to know that, like, and sort of starting to give them some exposure to why intergenerational spaces are important and how they can, you know, be really successful, and sort of starting to show them, like, number one, some of the data behind why it matters and how, like, it's something that's wanted, and then precedents where it's worked. And then, like, ultimately, if the client says, no, what we want is only this, then, you know, but it's nice to start to me, starting to, like, bridge and push and, like, educate and talk about, like, what is possible and change what the aspiration is early.
I can jump in too with a couple examples. I think there have been some really innovative ones, like I think it's in Seattle, there's a preschool that's housed within a senior living facility. And so that, you know, at the bottom floor of the retirement home, there is a preschool. I also wrote about an example in my book that's in the Netherlands, where it's a retirement home, but they invited a few college students to come live in the residence. And just by inviting younger people to come live there, it completely transformed the health and well-being of the older residents, as well as many other things. And so those are
probably not to mention probably the economics of it, right? I mean,
absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they took a full community approach. They saw such success with that they opened up their doors to the community. So now anyone in the neighboring community can come in for coffee or to use the library or to use the gym and things like that. But the other thing I would say is that, you know, to create socially healthy places, there's 2 steps. There's the first is building and designing the physical structure like Erin spoke about. And then there's also the community programming, right? And so even if the space is still designed for in one way for older residents, there's intergenerational programming and activities and events that can be layered on top of that. And I really see those as working hand in hand.
100%. And then I think, you know, that can ultimately, by doing some of those too, you can also start to like get exposure. Like for instance, if they wanted to start to like try out some of those in their existing facility and then start to see like, oh, okay, well, maybe that would make sense, or where can I go to, or yeah, I love that.
Sandra, I wanted to go back to your idea of doing something here in the community, and another group comes to mind called Youth Built Boston. They are a group of high school, it's a nonprofit that fosters high school students who are interested to learn about design and construction. And they do isolated projects sometimes like these in the community. And they would do it in some neighborhoods of Boston, either Roxbury or Dorchester, because that's where the mission of Youth Built is, to help actually uplift communities that need outdoor spaces, that need to learn. And I would think that a 16-year-old getting sensitized about the danger of loneliness and how their work could go towards fighting that social phenomena as people get older can have multiple fold benefits to the society, whether it's a small park in a tiny neighborhood that gets a kiosk that says something. I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud. Or it is a landscaping project that brings people together. I think Youth Built could be a resource to add to this.
Love that. And I think, I mean, obviously building something, and I'll share a really cool example that's taking place in Dallas over the next few months. But I think like that is great, and maybe that's next year, but even just starting to design and starting to get, because I think that it's like, one, it gives them an understanding of the problem, but instead of just being like, okay, and now this sucks and I'm weighed down by this problem, letting them, hey, Amy, letting them then be able to take action about it. Sort of like Anne was saying, like when you can come together with purpose and you feel like you're able to, you know, potentially solve something, that's really exciting. Like it helps you to feel like, okay. Also, I would love to see what high schoolers like create, you know what I mean? Like how exciting. Like, yeah.
We have been working with them over the past 2 years. We host them here in our office, and their mind is so open. They have no restrictions, and it's fascinating. I think I have a few people here in my office who logged in. They work with them, Elizabeth and Peter, and it's always so refreshing to be with these high schoolers where there's no barriers, there's no eyelids. The world is just everything for them. Absolutely. Anyone has questions to our speakers? I want to touch
Sorry,
on
I just wanted to ask, how do we reshare Hasley, Erin, and Sandra's info? Because there's a book coming out and there is organizations. I'd love to at least share this more pointedly with the people who attended, myself included.
It's in the chat.
Yeah, I
Perfect.
dropped a link in the chat, or all the links in the chat, Jonathan, but I'm also happy to send them by email if that's easier. So just let us know. Yeah.
Presley, if you could send us by email there and what you want,
Sure.
because there is a place on our website at the BSA where we could put resources that come out of sessions like these. And I think if you have a link to a podcast or a link to an event or something, we could ask the BSA to put it part of the sessions, because
that'd be great.
Those videos that we're recording right now, they're fairly popular and people come back and they listen to those. So this becomes a good place for all of them.
Wonderful. Yeah, we'll add a few more links in that case and we can send that to you. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. Yeah.
And I've added the link to the End Loneliness MA to the coalition's website.
Great. I want to note something that one of you said. I think it was Erin, I think you said it, is that your community needs to make space for you. This resonated with me because you said it in the framework where you were pregnant, you're taking your baby and you're going out, but then you needed to understand or feel that the community is making space for you and the baby. And this is a mindset. And this is where I think space could help, but also space could influence people in certain behaviors. And I want to believe that if you stepped out into space A versus stepped out into space B, the people in A versus B would make a space differently.
Mhm.
Can you give us more on that experience of how, when you step out into the world, and what is the space that you are looking for through this experience?
Yeah.
I think it's
Well, I mean, like you just like rabbit holed me into like nerd central, but so I'll respond to that a little bit, and then also I'm sure that Kathleen and Sandra have thoughts. I actually have a few articles that are in draft around this topic. Basically like tapping into what I think is like sometimes under talked about, at least in the circles I travel in mostly, which is when we are so dysregulated, right? Like, oh, I'm so busy, I'm going from this thing to this and that, like, or when we are dysregulated because we are in front of the Whole Foods that like makes us feel like we have like speeding traffic, right? If we really look at like our evolutionary inheritance and understanding that we evolved not to have really loud things running past us because that probably meant that we were in danger,
Yeah.
right? And that a lot of, when we talk about biophilia and components of that, it is about, to me, it's about regulating a nervous system so that it can be able to like receive and to be kind and compassionate. And that's where we need to be in order to connect.
Yeah.
Now that may be getting a little like woo woo and weird for everybody on the call, but I'll pass it over to Kathleen, because I will just say like having spaces knit together as well as having individual spaces, so important for helping you to feel like you belong, and especially as you bring new life into the world.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have anything to add. I think that was really well said, Erin, but Philippe, do you have other reflections on that?
No, it's just starting to go. I never thought about. I know spaces influence people's behavior, but also people influence the quality of the spaces they are in them, and hence are factors in creating inclusivity or exclusivity in a certain environment. So it's kind of a chain link effect, like
Absolutely.
a reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. We need the places where we can gather, and then we need to take ownership of them, to take care of them, to activate them through events and opportunities that actually connect people, being welcoming in and of our, in the ways that we interact with the people in those spaces, not just our own friends and family, but other community members, neighbors, coworkers. I mean, it's this beautiful interplay, and that's what I love about talking to architects, is you get to design that, and then we as humans bring it to life. And I think there's so much more opportunity there to really lean into that. I mean, with loneliness rates as high as they are, and with all of our need for meaningful connection, there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah. Sandra, how are the chat benches going? Where can we see them?
Well, I know there's one, I think Antron, I see you on the call. I know there's one in Salem, because the one with Salem was, the Boston Globe did an article in Salem. But generally, I know there's one in, Antron, are you there? The town is escaping me. But there are a number of them that are going around. Boston has a number of them. They just don't have the sign on them, but we have a lot of in the Boston area.
I wonder if there has been also some observations about how people use them once they are put in public. And
Yes.
the whole like dynamics around these elements.
Yeah, it is not, we did not come up with it. This is a program that started in Europe. It's going very well in London. And there's a lot of research that shows the success of them. So it's nothing, we believe in borrowing and using ideas. Doesn't always have to start with ground zero, but they're doing very well, and we're really hoping to promote more of them in the area and throughout the Commonwealth, rather.
Philippe, I have some experience. So I spent quite a bit of time in Sweden doing research on community-based living and learning in the community. And there's Samtal, they call them chat benches in Sweden. And what I found is in the communities where there are many, many, many of them, that is when people recognize them, they know what they are. They're painted this bright yellow. For example, I was just in Göteborg, Sweden. There are like 75 throughout the community. And it begins to create a familiarity. Oh, that's what that is. When I sit down there, Sandra might come over and say, hi, who are you? I haven't met you. And what I've also knew to be true is that oftentimes people sit on their favorite bench, and somebody might walk by every day on their way to work or perhaps to school, and then they see somebody and they feel an invitation to sit down and say, I see you every day. So I think the where they're placed, but also having enough of them so that there's a recognition has really been successful. So I am bravo to Massachusetts for adopting best practice. Yay.
Yeah. They're also being used in schools. They're called buddy benches at schools.
Whatever you call them, I think once people get oh, that's what it is, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. I think they should be used in senior housing as well, because when there's a new person moving into a community, it's like going back to high school and all this fear of being with new people and who are all these people around me. Yeah.
Got some good book recommendations. I love these are like OG what got me into architecture, Drake. So thank you. And you'll be excited. We're talking about, I've been partnering for the last, I don't know, 4+ months with the Foundation for Social Connection. And this is the first time they've focused on the built environment. And Risa, who Sandra kind of shared in one of her, and I are co-leading the effort. And so I've been adding in stuff about proxemics and bringing in different language of architecture into it, and it's been wonderful to share those examples. And so we're still like putting final touches on it. So if you guys have really good case studies, and I was thinking of some of the stuff that you were sharing, if you have specific, like where you're like, check out this project at this place or whatever, there's certain areas where we can still plug those in. So let me know.
I'm gonna put a plug to this gentleman in the headphones right at the top left of my screen, because he's experimenting with proxemics in his community. Gus.
Is that, I see 2 people with headphones. Gus. Hello, Gus. Tell us all about it.
You have the voice. Hello, Gus. Tell us all. You have like
Hello, Gus.
you should be on the radio.
Thank you.
No, we're doing a lot of research on proxemetics, Dunbar's number. How do we develop spaces that help people be with about 6 feet of each other so that they can have that microsecond or decision that say, hey, good morning, how you doing? And the goal is to set up spaces so that people can maybe take one of the 150 in Dunbar's number and maybe make them into one of the 15, and then eventually into one of the 5. We've completely redesigned our ground floor so that We have space, we had a huge dining room, fit 400 people, it was crazy. And the thing was so loud that people wouldn't go to the dining room. And now we broke it up into smaller parts with fireplaces and nooks and plenty of spaces to sit with if you're by yourself, but then you're about 6 feet apart from other people. When they walk by, they can say hello or whatever. So we've been doing a lot of that kind of work. And then now we're working on building a third building, and we happen to be in New Haven, Connecticut. So we're looking at building, we have 2 towers now, and we're looking at building a third. And I think a big chunk of what I struggle with is that, we tend to have some thing about segregating people. And so when we're looking at this, we're not looking at building an age-restricted building. We're going to be building a building that is a community, and it's a neighborhood, and it has all the different ages living in the same space, and multi-generations living in the same building, because it doesn't make sense to us anymore to have a senior building. So I know even the idea, which I fully respect, environments for aging, that's great, but do we need to have environments for aging? And thinking that we're talking about seniors, we could be talking about 20 somethings and 30 somethings, and looking at this in a broader perspective, kind of like universal design.
I love that.
We're taking it from a very different perspective.
Can I comment on that quickly? Gus, what I love about something you said stood out to me, which was you said you're designing for 6 feet apart because that kind of is a width that strikes up conversation. Wasn't that the social distancing requirement during COVID? We had to be 6 feet apart. So I love that you're kind of flipping this of what used to divide us and be this sort of safety measure keeping us apart is now the invitation for us to connect. There's something beautiful there about that 6 feet apart and 6 feet together.
Well, that's a nice way of really looking at it, and I appreciate that perspective. One of the things that we've learned is that an 8-foot hallway reduces social interaction. If people are 8 feet apart from each other, they never have that sense of needing to acknowledge the other person. And it's very cultural. So when you're Americans, this is not necessarily the same in other parts of the world, but we have 2 people walking towards each other in a hallway, and the hallway is 8 feet apart from each other. They never have to really interact with each other. But if the hallway is, say, 4 feet apart or 5 feet apart or whatever, there's this moment when you have to make a decision of whether or not you acknowledge the person or you're going to give the person space. And you want to have that as much as possible, so that people are passing each other and it's not that people are going in this direction, don't have to interact with others. So we're looking at that, and like one of the most important things is, where do you put the mailbox? If you put a mailbox in a building and you put it near the door so that you can give your mail on the way in or way out or whatever, you're really reducing people's connections. So if you put the mailboxes in a place where people are also having coffee, so that you stop and you have a sorting space where you get rid of the junk mail and you do all that sort of stuff, it gives you a moment to pause while someone else may be 6 feet from you and says hello, good morning, or like your dog, whatever. There's a lot of things that I see, and so I'm a nursing home administrator. I grew up in a nursing home when it started when I was 16. And I've just, over the course of time, my definition of good care has changed and evolved. Yeah, and now I'm at a point where I've worked in environments that were very institutional, with a sense of pride of being institutional. And over time, institutional is no longer prideful. And we got to the point where we were really struggling about the whole idea of bringing in plants even in the building, or pets in the building. And it's a great thing to be able to bring in dogs or whatever and do quote unquote pet therapy. But there's no substitute from being pet therapy to actually having dogs living in the building. It's like we do a lot of work, and we put a lot of effort into these little moments where we can have someone have an experience, and that's great. And hopefully that turns into something that is more long-term. But there's nothing that can substitute an environment where people are connected, and dogs are just naturally a part of it. So if you're doing pet therapy, it's great. It's better than not doing it. But if you really want to do something that's going to be impactful, move past the therapy part. Nobody wants to be therapeutic anyway. And I think about intergenerational programs and stuff. There's this wonderful place in Connecticut where half of the building is an adult, adult day center, and the other half is a child daycare center. Great thing. They mix the groups together. And those are folks who need care on both ends of the life spectrum. And I think it's a wonderful experience, a wonderful model. I just keep thinking to myself, why do we need to have that in a separate building? Why aren't we having people living together communally? And, at one point I was talking to this person who really helped me think a little bit more forward, where I was telling her about proximetics and telling her about all the stuff that we're doing. And she said, she lived in some building that was relatively new in New York, and this younger couple moved in somewhere within her path, and they kept saying, good morning, how are you doing, whatever. And when the woman got pregnant, she couldn't help herself but to buy a gift. And she was so excited. And she was just so excited to have a child around. So, well, over the course of time, she became the child's grandparent. And in a more authentic way than, just visiting kind of thing. And it became this long-term relationship. And so she also eventually had a, babysitter kind of thing. So to me, there's a certain amount of steps that we take to progress, but I think we can really go beyond that when we're thinking about things more holistically. So.
Thank you. I knew you would add a lot to that conversation. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Any last comments? We're 5 minutes away from the end of our session. Just want to be mindful of people's times. Wonderful. Erin, Kathleen, and Sandra, I really, really want to thank you for this presentation and for this beautiful discussion that we are just starting together. And one of you, if you can put all the notes or all the things that you want us to share on the website, we will be very happy to do so. And we'll put up on our web, and then we should stay connected and see if we can create something together in some geography sometime soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
love
you.
that.
And stay tuned for our June event.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye,
you so
everybody.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank you,
everyone.
Nikki.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.